So let me just give a little bit of background about the group that I run under founder and Princeton neuroscientist turned electoral analyst Sam Long. And our mission is to utilize our cross-disciplinary team and our network of partners that are working in states on the ground to make real change that results in a more transparent and participatory redistricting process. And so when I finished my math degree, I was drawn into redistricting analysis because of the wide range of interesting mathematics that you can apply to this problem. And that's all this cool stuff that we'll probably hear about next. But once I was hired to actually do the work, I started to realize that the underlying data sets that you need to run these algorithms or the analyses were actually one of the hardest pieces of the puzzle. So early on, I worked with Professor Moon Duchin at MGGG, and I was mostly preparing data and exploring some analyses in states like Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and Ohio. And one cool thing we worked on was a paper that examined granular election data in Massachusetts, where statewide about 33 to 35% of the population votes Republican, but also about 35% of each county and about 35% of each township and precinct. And we can't get much smaller than that without some inference, but I bet even 35% of most census blocks vote that way. So we showed mathematically that it wasn't possible to build a district that would have a majority R votes, even if the small units, this picture here is precincts. So even if these units didn't have to be a contiguous shape like we're used to seeing districts, you still couldn't put the most R-leaning pieces together to form something that would be a majority R. So it sort of showed that there's a really interesting relationship between the spatial distribution of voters and the lines that divide them up and representation. And it showed that granular election data is really the key to all of this because it allows us to put the lines and the effects together. And I should mention, I didn't put the legend here, I'm realizing, but only the red shapes are even majority are. Most of the yellow and orange are just, you know, around 30%. So it's really rare to find one that's majority. So anyway, I decided to dedicate most of my time to gathering that granular election data, and that led to the creation of Open Precincts, which is a project with the goal of putting this data together for the whole country. And we hope it provides both easy to access and accurate downloads of all of the states for journalists and academics, and also technical minds who want to run their own analyses. But we also wanted to provide an interface for the public to interact with the data and dig into their communities and build a deeper level of understanding around how line drawing can affect them personally and how the layout of vote trends is really important. So these days I get to apply math not only to the data sets we're preparing, but also in the process of collecting and curating them. And it's an area full of really interesting geospatial analysis problems and what I like to call data detective work. And one of the goals of Open Precincts that we're aspiring to is to have a standardized and validated national data set where each file is graded so users can back up the data they're using in projects if it's for a legal case or if it's a community organization that has to show that they know what they're talking about. And we also make sure that our files are compatible with a lot of the commonly used open source software packages. And MGGG, that group I used to work with, develops a lot of those. So that's what I'm showing here in our little piece of Open Precincts that tells you what you're downloading, that it tells you how closely the votes match to what we should be expecting. If there's area in the file everywhere we're expecting area, and if it works with those packages. So that's the curation of it, but the gathering and the preparation isn't really easy either. So I wanted to just show a little clip here. This is an example of a piece of software that we built using mathematical techniques of sampling that carries precinct shapes over from a PDF map like this over to a shapefile. So here we're determining what the precinct boundaries are, and then we are filling in each distinct area with a different random color, and then it uses some mathematical sampling to, with census blocks underneath, figure out which region each census block is in. And then we're able to make a geospatial file just out of this PDF in just a couple of minutes. So this is a cool way to use math and computer science together to help move this project along. And it has some really cool implications further than just redistricting. So here's the census blocks we used, and this is the new geospatial file that exists now, and it didn't exist before. So that's the kind of stuff we work on. And then also, I'll be real quick so we can hear from our other panelists, but we also sort of let the data really drive our policy work and our legal work as well. So we have a constantly growing legal team. And one of the things that we've done is in New Jersey, which was one of the worst landscapes for collecting precinct level election data, we worked with local lawmakers to pass a bill requiring this be published a certain number of days after the election. So we've been working with reform organizations in other states to improve the language and try to get it passed in other problem states. So now we have to work on 2016 through 2019 for New Jersey, but starting in 2020, it's kind of done for us. And they just published the primary data, which was really exciting. So the last thing I want to touch on that was hinted at before is we're undergoing an expansion to what we're calling the Electoral Innovation Lab. And it's a partnership with an organization in New York called Open Primaries. So one of the things we've done is a group of my collaborators took a unique look at what legislative races are looking really close next week and which ones could influence the control of redistricting in 2020. And that's our Redistricting Moneyball project. So I'd take a look at that if you're interested. We also got involved in a ranked choice voting case in Maine where we provided an amicus brief digging into the technical reasons why RCV didn't disenfranchise voters who didn't rank every candidate, like the lawsuit was trying to prove. And that was, I'm pretty sure it helped move the lawsuit along very quickly, which was fun to see. We're also working with a group of undergraduates who've built a tool to gather community of interest boundaries. And community of interest is kind of a geographic concept in redistricting that needs to be the topic of a lot of research in the near future. And this will hopefully make that a little more possible. So the idea of EIL is to apply the same data and math-driven approach and analysis to reform topics other than gerrymandering, and to utilize our location at Princeton to create a space for unique research and collaboration on democracy innovations and their interactions with another. That's a really special piece of it. So I invite you all to be part of the Electoral Innovation Lab network moving forward, and please don't hesitate to get in contact with me anytime. But I'll go ahead and stop sharing and turn it over to our next panelist.